UFC Fight Night sees Dan Ige taking on the Korean Zombie, a fan favorite. Everyone loves the Zombie. And look, when this fight was announced, it was an interesting one. Some would say kind of a make or break fight for the Korean Zombie. Maybe a bit of an overreaction, but definitely an interesting fight. And featherweight does have, a bit of a logjam at the top while Ortega and Volkanovski figure out business. But look, an interesting fight on paper. And, before I get into the reaction and the recap, please, guys, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. Look, within MMA, and the UFC has the best exponents of it, obviously, there are a lot of different sort of fighters. And, in the Korean Zombie, you have a fighter that's almost rewriting the chapters of what his fighting style looks like, known in the past as literally a zombie, wading through, taking through intense punishment and obviously dishing out. I think the Korean Zombie has, come to a place where he's really integrating the full diversity of what his game looks like. And this fight kind of showed that, kind of really showed mixed martial arts in its truest sort of permutations. And I think when you look at different sort of fighters and how they sort of react to each other, what really was playing out in various sort of iterations and various sort of permutations was the fact that, on the feet, at least initially, while Ige did have, a couple of strikes that did land and did stun the Korean Zombie, for the most part, at least within the first couple of rounds, the Korean Zombie was really fighting at a pace that was, conducive to his fighting style, and really did not feel bothered at the feet to a degree. And I think the point that I'm trying to make here is this is interesting because from a stand-up perspective, they both employ very different sort of styles. The Korean Zombie, not a lot of movement at all. In fact, if anything, he stays in the center line, engaging, very heavy on the lead leg. And you saw that with his jabs, he has the longer reach. So he was, reaching out and touching Ige with relative frequency. The hooks would come. But, within the first 3 rounds, basically what you saw, at least from a stand-up perspective, was the Korean Zombie really getting into a really strong pattern of understanding how Dan was going to strike, and really, not necessarily respecting it to a degree. And I think the diversity in the game is really, especially in the first couple of rounds, because rounds 4 and 5 were different. They were definitely different, and we saw Ige come in with renewed vigor and a renewed appreciation of how he was going to tackle the fight. But let's talk about the first 3 rounds. The Korean Zombie, there was definitely a power differential. Obviously, there were exchanges, where the Korean Zombie was really, punching from a one-off perspective, with the jabs, with the hooks, and whenever he would land, you would definitely see the power differential between the two sort of fighters, and there were frequency in those exchanges that were, backing Ige up. Ige, on the other hand, the commentary team was mentioning, the lack of feints. I think it's an interesting one. Feints are in vogue, right? With Israel Adesanya bringing them back, everyone's talking about it, and I think there's definitely cases for it, like 100%. Ige was almost playing the straight punch for punch sort of game, although he was coming in with more combinations and reaching out the end of it. You could tell, that the Korean Zombie wasn't necessarily phased with that. And, you can see it in the body language. You can see it in how he's interacting. And you saw the full repertoire of the Korean Zombie. And I think the mixing up of the takedowns, and these were takedowns that were led by the strikes from the Korean Zombie. And this is an interesting component because, you're not seeing a double leg blast. You're not seeing a very wrestle-centric sort of takedown methodology, but a really grappling sort of centric takedown methodology, which really integrated, MMA centric rather, the strikes and the takedowns. And when he took down, there are different distances that the fights occur. I think the distance, and the commentators were picking up on this very well, were these scrambles or these instances where the Korean Zombie would very slickly take the back, assume really dominant positions, whether he was slowly but methodically coming to mount, whether he was slowly but methodically taking the back. And when he took the back, the use of the body triangle, being able to be ambidextrous enough to, swap those body triangles, because Ige was definitely aware of what he was doing. But the control, and again, the control, the pace, the striking, it was a very measured performance from the Korean Zombie. In rounds 4 and 5, we definitely saw Dan Ige, turn the dial up in terms of pressure. And, seeing rounds 1 to 3, that was really the only way he was going to take the Korean Zombie out, to elevate the pace, to take the fight to the Korean Zombie and almost be zombie-esque in terms of coming forward and really applying the pressure. And in these rounds, you could definitely see a momentum shift in terms of, the output yielded by the Korean Zombie. Although for the most part, whenever he was in any sort of trouble, he would have extremely timely takedowns. And this is the difference. This is the major difference between a lot of fighters. What is your A game, what is your B game, and what is your C game? And if your A game doesn't work, are you able to integrate and mix things up? And really, this is the essence of mixed martial arts, and we were able to see it. We were able to see a very measured performance by the Korean Zombie. Was it the most exciting fight? When you compare it to some of the fights that we saw this year, maybe quite not, but was it an extremely technical fight? Was it a tactical fight? There are so many amazing techniques that were employed here. And the fact that, on the fly, Korean Zombie was able to really make this fight fought at a pace that he was comfortable within, and really displaying a really dominant sense of control when he went to the ground. Under no circumstance was, the Korean Zombie in any levels of pressure there. And, he thoroughly, over the course of 5 rounds, was able to best, Dan Ige, who put up a really good fight there. So look, what's next for these guys? Well, the Korean Zombie apparently wants Max Holloway. That's a good fight. That's a decent fight. Obviously, Max in Yair was a fight that's kind of fallen through, but featherweight's good. Featherweight is popping, like a lot of the divisions in the UFC. As for Dan Ige, now this is an interesting one. Dan Ige, 50K. Yeah, it's a real interesting one. He's a very, very well-rounded, solid fighter who's almost a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I do not mean this in a disrespectful way at all. I definitely think, when you look at guys like Oliveira and, the ability for them to change over time, he's a perfect template of how this could occur. But, Ige's faced 2 tests in Calvin Kattar and the Korean Zombie, and definitely, experience and weapons in the case of Kattar have really shown to be his downfall there. So it is back to the drawing board for Dan Ige, but, when it comes to the heart of a fighter and really the mindset of a fighter from a mental fortitude and, understanding perspective, Ige has that in spades. I think from a technical and game plan perspective, there are definitely elements where, he can work with his team in terms of, adjusting on the fly and really deciding whether to, put the pressure early on if the more tactical elements of game plans A to B isn't working. So look, both fighters put on an entertaining fight, a really good fight in the featherweight division. It's back, baby. So guys, that was my reaction video to Ige versus Zombie. If you like what you saw, leave us some comments below. Tell us what you think about the fight. What do you think about Korean Zombie? What do you think about Dan Ige? And again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Support us, guys, and we hope to see you soon.